We saw in the last session that the gospel gives us a new definition to our productivity and a new goal to our productivity. To be productive means to be abundant in doing good, and the goal in all the things we do every day should be to serve others. But how do we actually do this? How do we go about doing good? Does it happen automatically, or are there some changes we need to make? Further, this is also about our joy. How do we go about getting things done in a way that maximizes our fulfillment? Is it possible to be productive and happy? Most things boil down to a few fundamental core principles. This is almost always the best way to understand any subject. Productivity is no different. In order to maximize our productivity, there is a basic underlying governing principle that we need to know. Put the welfare of the other person before your own, and be on the lookout to do this. I call this generosity. This is both the right thing to do and the way to be most productive in our work and in the world. It is the surprising counterintuitive key to productivity. Success in business and life does not come from crushing the weak, doing as little as you can get away with, and trying to get every dime that you can out of people. It comes from the opposite, helping the weak, going the extra mile, and caring about the welfare of the other person. This is both biblical and, here's what's really fascinating, it's what the best business thinkers have been finding in recent decades. There is now a large set of business research that shows that generosity and, yes, love are actually better for business than a stingy, me first, I'm going to advance no matter what mentality. But what I'm calling generosity here is the outworking of an even more fundamental principle, namely love. We can put it this way. Love is the guiding principle of the Christian life, and generosity is the chief way love manifests itself in the world of work, our communities, and society. This is revolutionary, and it comes right from the core New Testament text on time management, which is Ephesians 5:15 through 17. So Paul writes, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." Now notice, recall how in an earlier session we talked about sometimes the biblical authors use parallel phrases. They say the same thing in different words, which sheds light on the meaning. And we saw one of the ways Paul does this here is by putting in parallel walking as a wise person with making the best use of the time. There's another parallel Paul makes here. There's really three, which is cool. He also parallels making the best use of the time with understanding the will of the Lord. So the way to make the best use of the time is to know what God's will is and do it. Everybody knows what Jesus wants, even people who aren't following him. Everybody knows that what Jesus wants from people is love. He wants people to love one another and live a life of love. We know this, of course, because it is the great commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Those commandments do not go on pause when we enter the workforce or our communities. They always apply. Now, we don't even have to go back to the great commandment to know that love is central to the biblical concept of time management and effective living. It's right here in Ephesians 5. You'll recall how Paul paralleled making the best use of the time with understanding the will of the Lord. If you look to the beginning of the chapter, in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 5, Paul tells us the will of the Lord right there. He says that we are to be imitators of God as beloved children and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. This is all of gospel-driven productivity in 2 verses. First, notice that it is gospel-centered. Paul isn't simply saying walk in love. He's pointing to Christ, who walked in love first, who gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering to God. So he is our example, and not just our example, but our power, our source of energy and life. And then we manifest his love through our own love. Or you could better say our love is a manifestation of his love. And then second, notice, of course, Paul's emphasis on love here. He is saying that God's will for us is that we walk in love. That's what he says. Be imitators of God and walk in love. So if we go back to 5:15 through 17 and we ask, what is the will of the Lord? We see Paul has answered it. It is that we walk in love. What does it mean to apply love to the workplace? And what I want to look at is 4 things. Here are 4 things that it means to do all the things that we do from love so that all of them can truly become good works and acts of worship even. The first thing it means to do something from love is to have a real goodwill toward the other person. So motives count. And Jonathan Edwards said this better than anyone I've seen. He said, the essence and heart of love is a real goodwill to the other person. That means wanting their welfare. You care about them and you care about their welfare. Jonathan Edwards actually was foreshadowing my middle school social studies teacher, who rightly said, love is genuine concern for others. Now, she wasn't speaking as a Christian, but that is a fantastic definition of love. And we actually see Paul give this definition to love in Philippians 1:15 through 16. He says, some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love. So you see the parallelism. Goodwill is parallel to love. So to do something out of love is to do out of goodwill towards the other, wanting their welfare. To apply this to the workplace, when you are doing your work, let's say you're making sandwiches at Chick-fil-A. What it means is you make those sandwiches out of a genuine desire to serve the other person. It means you genuinely want them to benefit from your work. You care about the person you are doing the work for. You care about your colleagues. If the next person in line from your work is not the customer, but another employee, you care about them. And you want things to go well for them, and you want your work to actually benefit them and not others. Here's the second thing it means to do your work from love. It means that the welfare of the other person is your chief concern, not first your own. Now, this is very significant. A lot of times in our work, we can fall into a mentality of almost serving ourselves. We just want to get it done. Or we want to succeed. We want to advance in our career. And both of those are good motives until they become the main motive. A lot of times we actually sacrifice the welfare of the other person, whether it's the customer or another colleague. We sacrifice their welfare a lot of times to make things easier on ourselves. We say, yeah, this way of designing and producing the product would work better for people, but it's harder to produce. It takes more time. So let's do it this way, which is easier for us. Yeah, that's great. It makes your day easier, but guess what? The customer has to put up with that product every day after day, for many months and years. And what saved you a few hours of hassle is costing them days of hassle. That's not very loving. Here's the way I would put it, because sometimes we don't know that the work that we are producing is not going to serve people well. So we need to step back and add something, which I would put this way. Think hard about what the other person needs and do that. So think about the impact your product will have. Think about the user experience, how they are going to experience it, and whether that will cause problems and hassle to them or make things easier. And then do the things that will make it easier, even if it's harder on you. That's what it means to put the other person's welfare before yourselves. Now, I know in the business world, you have to do this in a way that's profitable. Not everything is going to be a BMW or Rolls-Royce category, but insofar as you are able, put forth the extra effort to make the product excellent, make it something that will actually serve the needs rather than make people's lives harder. Think hard about what the other person needs and do it. The third thing it means to act from love is to do beneficial things for others proactively. Don't just wait for people to ask or to run into problems. Think ahead, anticipate needs and desires, and meet them. This is really cool. It stems, in fact, right from the great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. How do you love yourself? Think about that. You don't love yourself by waiting until the last minute, usually, when you really need something and then do it. You don't, for example, wait until your car runs out of gas before you fill it. You anticipate. You see that it's getting on empty, you fill it up. You do things in advance. You look ahead if you're in high school to, you want to have a good job when you're older. So you go to college. You put planning and forethought into serving your own happiness. Since we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, we are therefore to put planning and forethought into how we will serve others. Be proactive. Jonathan Edwards says it so well. He says, a loving person is quick-sighted to discern the needs of others. Be quick-sighted to discern what people need and then do those things. We also already see how the Bible explodes the myth that God is only concerned about the spiritual component of life. Think again of how you love yourself. So we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Well, if I'm thirsty, do I say, I better read the Bible first? Or do I say, it doesn't matter if I get a drink as long as I read the Bible and spend enough time in prayer? No, if you're thirsty, you get a drink. If you're hungry, you get something to eat. So also, we should care about the full range of other people's needs, their physical needs as well as their spiritual needs. It is not biblical to focus on the spiritual needs at the exclusion of other real, legitimate needs that we are also able to help with, the physical, the social, and the intellectual. So be proactive in doing good and holistic in doing good. Care for the whole range of the person. Fourth, and finally, doing things from love for others means being creative and competent in doing good, not lackluster and shoddy. If we are going to be about serving others, then we need to be competent in serving them, because incompetence does not serve anyone. Lack of competence is actually like vandalism, the scripture says. He who is slack in his work is a cousin to him who destroys. Do not be a vandal in your work. Do your work with competence. And don't just care even about functionality. Care also about style and design, because we are whole people who are emotional as well as logical. That means we need to care about design, which appeals to the emotional side of human nature and not just the functional side of things. Care about good design because you care about the whole person. And be creative. Create a good experience for people. Don't just do the minimum. Don't just be utilitarian. Make things beautiful for people. That is having a holistic Christian ethic. Now, last of all, we got to ask this question, but how do we do good so that God gets the glory? And you can't leave God out of your work, out of your motives, and still ultimately be loving. So there's one more thing we need to add. It's not just love your neighbor as yourself, it's also love God with your whole heart. What does it mean to love God in our work? And it means this: do your work as an offering to God. We often only think of Sunday morning worship as an offering to God. We are singing to the Lord and giving the offering to the Lord, and that is wonderful. But the biblical concept of worship is much broader than that. Just as good works are anything we do in faith, we are also to do everything we do to the glory of God, meaning that everything we do can be an act of worship, just as everything we do can be a good work. What you do becomes an act of worship when you do it as an offering to God. What this means is incredible. It means that your whole life can be filled with worship. Instead of an hour on Sunday morning being worship, and then maybe your devotional time all day long, every day, you can be engaging in worship by doing everything you do as an offering to God. Now think about that. That means the whole world can be filled with worship. Worship can be abundant everywhere, always. Think of how honoring to the Lord and pleasing to Him it is for millions of His followers to be doing what they do as acts of worship constantly. Just as also the whole world can be filled with good works as we do the things we are already doing from a heart of goodwill towards others. This is a radical vision of life where the world can be bountiful in things that please others and please God. That is a beautiful world. Let me point out this fantastic Jonathan Edwards quote where he really goes to the heart of why it's so crucial to do our work as an offering to God. It really comes down, it's really an extension of God being the center of what we do. Edwards captures it perfectly. He says, "What is given to that which the individual makes his great end in giving. If his end be only himself, then it is given only to himself and not to God. And if his aim be his own honor or ease or worldly profit, then the gift is but an offering to these things. The gift is an offering to him to whom the giver's heart devotes and for whom he designs it. A great work is not given to God if God is not the great end in what you do or give." And so good works without the motive of love for God may do much temporal good, which is commendable in its own right, but they will not have the ultimate spiritual or eternal value that is so crucial because we've missed the most important point, God. So now we need to finally ask, what will the result of this be? And there is an incredible, surprising result of living a life for the good of others. We might say to ourselves, if I put the welfare of the other person before my own, who's going to look out for me? How am I going to have my needs met? If you are selfish and make yourself in your own private interests your idol, God will leave you to yourself and let you promote your own interests as well as you can. But if you do not selfishly seek your own, but do seek the things that are Jesus Christ's in the things of your fellow human beings, then God will make your interest and happiness his own charge, and he is infinitely more able to provide for and promote it than you are. The resources of the universe move at his bidding, and he can easily command them all to subserve your welfare, so that not to seek your own in the selfish sense is the best way of seeking your own in a better sense. It is the directest course you can take to secure your highest happiness. So, what's best next? The things we have seen allow us to answer that question.